In grade school, when asked to offer proof of a theorem, one frequently began one's argument by building on top of logical statements that had been worked out previously by others, in the form of theorems. It is a similar preliminary process necessary when identifying a new question to study, only instead of theorems, you're building on the research and conclusions of previous researchers. This preliminary process is called a literature review. Per Creswell and Creswell, doing a survey of the existing published articles covering one's topic of study can help the researcher understand the wider dialogue on the topic, who the key voices are, where the conflicts in opinion and interpretation lie, where there are gaps in the data, and where there is an opportunity to extend the understanding of the topic in a meaningful way through an additional study. But when you're building your fortress of research, how can you be sure your literature foundation isn't full of stinkers? Gray offers some advice. He highlights 5 key criterion for evaluating the strength of an article. Authority. Is it from a government agency, reputable academic institution? Accuracy. Has the source itself been peer-reviewed for accuracy and certified by being published in a respectable journal? Bias. Is the argument conservative, founded, and logical? Or is the research argument aggressive and aspirational? Objectivity. Is the information presented in the context of all views, or is one view favored unreasonably? Coverage. Does the article go into depth and detail, or does it make rash and superficial conclusions that are not really well substantiated? Assignment 5.1 offers an additional list of questions that can help select strong articles to provide a foundation for one's research. Before I get into those questions and the analysis of those questions, I wanted to highlight the overall layout of the article I selected. I selected Snyder, Hill, and Martin's Corporate Social Responsibility in the 21st Century, a view from the world's most successful firms. It's a 14-page article, and there are 10 sections. The first section is the abstract, which can tell the reader in 3 seconds or less what was done and why. Then comes the topic introduction, which expands on the abstract, and in some case, explains the results of the literature review, which was the case in this article. That leads to the restatement of the point of the research in more detail of the purpose of the research study. Next is the method, in the event the reader wants to try to duplicate the results or critique the conclusions. After the method comes the findings, and then a summarization in the form of conclusions, followed by a speculative recommendation on ways to expand the study or do further research. After that is the final remarks, and then the list of references. The article itself was published in the Journal of Business Ethics, which is produced by Springer. Per their website, Springer is a leading global scientific publishing company with over 2,900 journals in their portfolio. The article references 24 other articles and 2 books. Of the articles referenced, 5 were also published in the Journal of Business Ethics. 3 were published in the Public Relations Review and 1 in the Journal of International Business Studies. This is significant because the Journal of International Business Studies had the highest H index of all other publications referenced. It had an H index of 148. This particular H index was calculated by Schemajo, Journal and Country Rank website. The H index is a calculation that measures the productivity as well as the popularity of a journal. It is potentially a measure of authority. So one may want to lean toward sources that come from journals with high H indexes. Another similar measure is called the index factor. It's a measure of how many times on average, articles published in that journal are cited by other researchers. Again, the higher the number, allegedly, the higher the perceived authority of the journal. Most of the journals referenced in this article had an index factor of 3 or lower. The shining star in terms of relative authority was the article published in the Journal of International Business Studies. For the question analysis portion of the assignment, what I tried to do was I tried to find a quote from that section in question that directly answers or shows that the article satisfies the requirement of that question. So the first question had to do with the title and whether or not it accurately described the article. And the title is Corporate Social Responsibility in the 21st Century, A View from the World's Most Successful Firms. Now, a view from the world's most successful firms is pretty general. And again, the point of the study was to look at the top 50 U.S. and top 50 non-U.S. companies and look at the messaging, the CSR messaging that those companies were doing to their stakeholders to see if there was an emerging pattern of messaging categories. A view from the world's most successful firms doesn't necessarily say that, but it's general enough that I'm going to give it a pass. The second one had to do with the abstract and whether or not it clearly represented what the study or the article was about. And I'm going to lift this. I lifted this quote that this study is meant to examine the content of what firms are communicating to various stakeholders about their commitment to social responsibility behaviors. And that's exactly what the study was about. So I'm going to give that one a pass. Third one had to do with the research purpose. Again, the quote. The reason that they're doing this study is because they felt there was a lack of scholarship examining the content of what firms are actually saying to these stakeholders. So again, it was about these top 50 U.S. and top 50 non-U.S. companies and how they were messaging their stakeholders around CSRs. So I'm going to give that one a pass. The next one had to do with the theoretical framework. They come right out and say, and you can see here, that they're going to use grounded theory and qualitative content analysis. And later they also mentioned that they're going to use stakeholder theory as a framework for evaluating corporate social responsibility through the reported activities. So I'm going to give that one a pass. Number 5 had to do with the literature review and whether it was relevant to the study. All the resources seemed relevant and were published within 5 years of the article being published, and many were just published the 1 or 2 years before. So I'm going to give this one a pass. 6, was the method explained well? And did the method, the exact question is, do the methods explain how the research question was addressed? Again, the method outlined how they were going to use grounded theory to systematically collect and analyze data for the construction of a theoretical model, reviewing the patterns among the information. Direct quote. So overall, the method was clearly explained and supported by a detailed series of steps. Scan websites for CSR statements, sort them and categorize them by stakeholder, look for similarities in emergent themes, come up with appropriate monikers, compare U.S. to non-U.S. themes. So they did go into detail about how they were going to use grounded theory in the method. I'll give that one a pass as well. 7 and 8 combined. It had to do with the results being clear, and does the discussion explain the results in relation to the theoretical framework? The high-level results were very clear, and the article does go on to explain the different thematic categories identified with several data samples to support the findings. The theoretical framework, again, was a grounded theory and stakeholder theory. And again, the article goes through each of the emerging category themes and explains how the organization's messaging and intent was similar across stakeholder categories. So I'll give that one a pass. And the last one had to do with limitations. And were there any limitations discussed in the study? And where I kind of found the limitations was actually teased out in the suggestions for future research. So there were 5 different things that were teased out. One of them was that, and these are direct quotes, none of these firms provided a description of the costs incurred as a consequence of socially responsible actions. So that potentially could be a meaningful and additional piece of data that might help uncover some patterns or might explain some of the patterns. The second one, the degree to which these firms put into operation their corporate social responsibility is espoused on their website. So there was no verification that what they were saying on their website was actually being done. They were specifically going with a level of trust that what was on the website was actually true. Third, confirmation from third parties, such as the news media, may be an excellent source of verification of practice. So again, helping to verify that what the company said they were doing, they were actually doing. Fourth, stakeholder reactions to CSR messages to gauge their effectiveness and influence. So they didn't do any kind of surveying with the stakeholders to see if the messaging was actually effective. So that's another limitation. And then the final limitation was that there wasn't any quantitative rigor. It was a qualitative analysis. And so they suggest or hypothesize that if there were some sort of quantitative mechanism that was included in an additional study, they might know how often they might have a better understanding of how the messages are disseminated. So those were some of the limitations. And that's my analysis of this article. And overall, I would give it a thumbs up, and I would use it as part of my literature review. Thanks. This is Todd.